Good morning. Happy Monday. I hope everyone had a great weekend. So before we get into today's primary objectives, which is, in regards to your business strategy for Tesla Asian expansion, I'd like to start with our usual 30-minute seminar. So today's seminar will focus on 10 barriers to entry in international business. Now, that isn't to say these are the only barriers that exist, but they are fundamentally the most essential. So firstly, let me give you a brief introduction to the barriers we will discuss today. So the first one will be competition. So the most obvious thing to address before entering a market, any market for that matter, is the extent to which other players exist, particularly in the space you seek to compete or add value to. So, who are your competitors? How many competitors are there? What does that market share look like? What are their strengths and weaknesses? Conversely, what are your opportunities and threats given their positioning in the market? Right? These are the basics. And then you dig a little deeper to uncover the market makeup. So, in regards to the market makeup, are there only 1, 2, or 3 players dominating the entire market? If so, why? If not, why? Can you establish an understanding of these players' business models and general business strategies? To what extent are they vertically or horizontally integrated? Have they achieved economies of scale or scope? And to what extent can you compete with their price points or pricing strategies in general? As we've touched on several times in previous classes, scale is something many SMEs fail to achieve. And so this is an important area or factor in itself. Here's another question. Are some of these players fully or partially owned by the government or in the interest of the government to do well? What roles do the informal economy and Black and gray markets play in general business practice in any given foreign market? This is particularly important in developing countries. Moving on to the market culture. Now, of course, understanding the market culture is a crucial component to success. This is not only important for the kind of consideration of consumer behavior, preferences, values, and psychology, but for understanding the local working culture and management styles. Okay, understanding business to business culture, and yes, understanding the competitive culture in any given market is essential. There are both formal and non-formal rules that govern business in a market. And there are both verbal and non-verbal communication and standards that exist and is expected in any given market. And it isn't always textbook, right? These are things you must study yourself and understand. And again, this is particularly important in emerging markets or developing economies. Geography. So geography's importance is pretty straightforward, right? Knowing your access to and pricing of natural resources and raw materials is imperative. Other obvious impactful variables are the physical environment, climate, terrain, the state of their urban development, transportation, networks, and infrastructure in general. Understanding the regional and national border dynamics is also important because it impacts potential, conflicts and wars, unfortunately. It also impacts politics, the social wellness of any given society, and the economy. So another thing to think about is, are there any regional or transnational trade blocs that you may benefit from? This is a huge area that encompasses much, and we'll touch on this more in a bit. Human capital and technology. All right, so one of the biggest obstacles to international expansion is identifying, establishing, and maintaining a substantially competent pool of local human resources that you can pull from at any given time. And for some industries and business types, this becomes even harder to do. For example, a tech company or any given business that relies on innovation or highly skilled workers with exceptional expertise. By the way, this is why the state of the local educational system becomes important to business, because education is responsible for developing human capital that businesses can eventually pull from. And with that being said, how much will your business rely on expatriates? What are the associated costs and policies regarding employment visas for expats? And what are the expenses for both local workers and expat salaries and employee benefits? Is employee outsourcing an option for you? Many things to think about here, okay? And in regards to technological infrastructure, that is, again, self-explanatory. In the age of acceleration, every company relies on technology to optimize their operations and save on cost. So some companies more than others, but we're all in the same boat here, okay? So having efficient, stable, and secure internet connections is an absolute must. Supply chain and partnerships. Okay, this is a big one. I'm going to be very clear on this one. Aside from the actual process or realization of selling goods or services to a foreign market, finding appropriate partnerships, suppliers, and servicers in a foreign market is by definition international business. Okay, so establishing mutually productive business synergies is the key to successfully entering an international market and sustaining your business there. And so obviously there'll be some barriers in this area. Some will be intentional and some will be unintentional. Some will be political and some will be environmental. Some will be, let's say, economical and some will be social. Some will be organizational and some will be personal. Some are placed by competitors and some are placed by the local government. Either way, they'll be there. They'll be there, guys. Some companies will turn you down because they're contractually exclusive with a competitor of yours in that foreign market. Some companies will do business with you, but give you unfair pricing. Yes, xenophobic practice in international business is a thing. Some businesses may turn you down simply because they're content with their long-standing kind of unshakable success and positioning in the market and see no value in doing business with you or partnering with you. I mean, look, in Western business culture and practice, this is a hard concept to grasp, but yes, business contentedness in some countries and markets is a real thing, for good or for worse. And in some cases, finding the appropriate partnerships, suppliers, and services in a foreign country may be difficult simply because they don't exist. The specific things that you need may not be being addressed by anyone in the local industries. And the reason could be based on perception of no demand for it, or lack of expertise in that area, or by some sort of strategic design by competitors or the government. Okay, these things actually in some cases can coexist with at the same time. Okay, so okay, speaking of government, okay, now it's clear that government can be beneficial to international expansion as well, right? But likewise, it can be an impediment. So there will be laws impacting foreign ownership and foreign direct investment. There'll be regulations and obstacles to securing the necessary licensing and permits to conduct your business. There'll be importation and exportation policies, taxes and tariffs that you'll have to deal with. There may be trade barriers and sanctions placed on any given foreign country. There may be excessive bureaucracy and red tape. We've spoken about red tape on many occasions in regards to developing countries and markets. The legal system in itself may even be an obstacle or barrier. So there'll be many governmental factors to consider that may pose as a barrier to entry. Intellectual property. Okay. I can tell you from firsthand experience that attempting to protect your intellectual property in some countries, be it patents or trademarking, aren't always so straightforward, and sometimes practically impossible given the local laws or lack thereof. And even if you can legally protect your intellectual property, the question still remains whether these things are actually regulated, policed, or given justice to in a legal process. Honestly, as an international business person, and more specifically a marketing and branding guy, I would say, product and consumer obsession, a great management team, operational excellence, and branding are the keys to combating copycats. Because at the end of the day, laws only work if they are being followed and regulated. And contracts are only as good as the people who sign them. That isn't to say that you shouldn't seek legal protection. Of course you should. But in international business, you should look inward more so than outward in regards to protecting the things that you do greatly. And that's it. Okay, economy, financing, and credit. So first, the basics. How stable is the economy? What is the GDP? What is the GNI? How strong is the local currency? What is the country's history of inflation, consumer purchasing power and unemployment rates, et cetera, et cetera? Okay. By the way, financing and credit is just as important for domestic business as it is for international business. Let me make that clear. However, the nature of and accessibility to finance and credit can drastically differ, right? When you look at international versus domestic business. Okay, so for example, do local banks give loans to foreign companies? Or does the local government give subsidies to foreign businesses? In fact, before answering those questions, here's an entry-level basic question. Must companies, or foreign companies, show a minimum amount of capital when registering a foreign business? How legitimate and efficient is the local banking system and financial institutions? This is another area where you could run into a lot of red tape, kind of excessive documentation and inefficient business practices. Very important area here. Moving on. Okay, now we get to number 10, learning curves. Now, this differs from everything above because it isn't textbook. No book, no classroom for that matter, can prepare you for everything, especially when doing business in a foreign place. And so I'm going to read this very carefully. There will always be nuanced barriers that can only be realized and fathomed by residing, practicing business, and conducting research in a country or market for a productive duration of time. I'm going to read that one more time. This is a big one. There will always be nuanced barriers that can only be realized and fathomed by residing, practicing business, and conducting research in a country or market for a productive duration of time. And it just is what it is, guys. This is why many multinational companies establish synergistic partnerships and licensing agreements with local companies. This is why many foreign businesses hire and pay handsomely local experts and experienced expats for upper management and executive positions, because it's all about experience in order to limit mistakes and lower your risk when entering a foreign market. Okay, so What I'd like to do now is return to our our first barrier on the list and proceed to address each one with more detail and depth. Also, I'd like to give some, real life examples and case studies of each, as we always do. And speaking of as always, there's no such thing as saving your questions for the end in our group discussions. I like everyone to participate and ask as many questions as you like, because this is a very important topic regarding practical international business. And which, by the way, isn't always addressed in your business simulation game that we conduct in this course. So let's have some productive discourse. Any questions before we begin?